The widow Lydia Davenport stood on the porch of her modest farmhouse outside Mineral Point, Wisconsin, watching the dust settle from where Thomas Garrett's wagon had just disappeared down the road. And she wondered how many more men would come asking for her hand before they finally understood she had no intention of remarrying. It was October of 1878, 3 years since William had died from fever, leaving her alone with their daughter Emma, who was now 7 years old and currently playing with her rag doll in the afternoon sun. The farm was small but productive enough. 40 acres of decent land with a good well, a sturdy barn, and fields that yielded corn and hay. Lydia had managed it all herself with occasional hired help during harvest, proving to everyone in town that she was perfectly capable of surviving without a husband. Thomas had been the fourth man, this month alone to come calling with flowers or some other token of affection, stammering through prepared speeches about how a woman needed a man to look after her, and how Emma needed a father. Each time, Lydia had politely but firmly declined, explaining that she and Emma were doing just fine on their own. The men never seemed to understand. They would leave looking confused or sometimes angry, as if her refusal was some kind of personal insult rather than a simple statement of fact about her own life and choices. The truth was that Lydia had loved William deeply, and his death had carved out a hollow place in her chest that still ached on cold mornings. But that pain had also revealed something important to her, something she might never have discovered if circumstances had been different. She was strong. She was capable. She could make decisions and run a farm and raise a daughter without needing someone else to tell her how or when or why. The independence she had found in widowhood was precious to her, more valuable than the security or companionship any of these suitors offered. They did not come to her wanting a partner or equal. They came wanting a housekeeper, a cook, someone to warm their beds and bear their children. She had been a wife before, a good wife, but she had been William's wife because they had loved each other and chosen each other freely. These men wanted her to be any wife, a replacement for something missing in their own lives, and that was not enough. Emma looked up from her doll and squinted against the sun. "Mama, why did Mr. Garrett look so mad when he left?" Lydia smoothed her daughter's light brown hair so like William's had been. "He was disappointed, sweetheart. Sometimes grown folks do not get what they want, and they forget how to handle that feeling properly." "You told him no again," Emma said. "It was not a question." The child had witnessed enough of these scenes to understand the pattern. "I did. Are you upset about that?" Emma considered this seriously, her small face thoughtful. "Mr. Garrett smells like onions and he talks too loud. I do not think I would like him for a papa." Lydia laughed despite herself. "Well, that is not why I said no, but I am glad you are not disappointed." "I miss Papa," Emma said quietly, "but I like it being just you and me. Is that bad?" "No, my darling, that is not bad at all." Lydia pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of sunshine and childhood that clung to her hair. "Not bad at all." The days grew shorter as autumn deepened into November. Lydia harvested the last of the garden vegetables, preserved what she could, and sold the rest at the market in town. The work was constant and physically demanding, but she took satisfaction in it. Her hands grew calloused and her back ached by evening, but these were honest pains, earned through her own labor. She hired Jacob Mueller, a young man from town, to help her get the fields ready for winter, plowing under the stubble and making repairs to the barn roof before the snow came. Mineral Point was a bustling community in those years, its population swelled by lead mining and the zinc trade that had made the region prosperous. The town itself was built on steep hills, with stone and brick buildings that gave it a solid, permanent feel, unlike the ramshackle wooden structures common to newer Western settlements. It had been founded by Cornish miners decades earlier, and their influence remained in the local architecture and food. Lydia had lived here all her life, had married William in the Methodist church on High Street, had buried him in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the valley. She knew everyone and everyone knew her, which made her continued refusal of suitors all the more scandalous in certain circles. The women at church were divided in their opinions. Some of the older widows understood and even quietly supported her choice. Others, particularly those in unhappy marriages themselves, seemed almost offended by her independence, as if it somehow reflected poorly on their own choices. The men were mostly just baffled. In their experience, women needed men the way flowers needed sun and water. The idea that Lydia genuinely preferred her solitude to their company simply did not compute. December brought the first serious snow, heavy wet flakes that blanketed the farm in white silence. Lydia spent the short days caring for the chickens and the 2 dairy cows, hauling water that froze in the bucket if she was not quick enough, splitting wood for the stove. Emma helped where she could, gathering eggs and sweeping the floor and learning to knead bread dough with her small, strong hands. In the evenings they sat by the fire, and Lydia read aloud from whatever books they had, which were not many. Emma was learning her letters and could now read simple words on her own, pointing them out with fierce pride. It was on a particularly cold afternoon in January of 1879 that Leonard Drake first appeared at Lydia's farm. She was in the barn mucking out stalls, unpleasant work but necessary, when she heard the sound of a horse outside. Her first reaction was irritation. Not another suitor, she thought, not today when I am covered in muck and exhausted. She set down the pitchfork and walked out into the weak winter sunlight, shading her eyes against the glare of snow. The man who sat on the horse was not anyone she recognized, which was unusual. He was probably in his early 30s, lean and weathered, dressed in worn but clean clothes and a heavy coat. His hat was pulled low, but she could see dark hair and serious eyes. He did not dismount immediately, just sat there looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Can I help you?" Lydia asked, keeping her voice neutral. The man touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "Madam, name is Leonard Drake. I am looking for work and I heard in town you might need help with your farm." This was unexpected. Lydia studied him more carefully. He did not have the look of the local miners or farmers. Something about him suggested distances traveled and a life lived mostly outdoors. His hands on the reins were steady and scarred from hard use. "I might," she admitted cautiously. "What kind of work can you do?" "Most anything that needs doing. I am good with animals, can fix fences and buildings, handle a plow. I have been working ranches down in Texas the last few years, but I wanted to see other country." "This is not ranch country," Lydia pointed out. "Most of the work here is mining or small farming." "I know, but I have had enough of Texas heat and I do not much care for being underground. I am not asking for much, madam, just honest work and fair pay." Lydia considered. She could certainly use the help, especially with spring planting coming in a few months. Jacob Mueller had been adequate but not particularly skilled, and he had recently gotten married and moved to his own place. But hiring a stranger, a man she knew nothing about, having him around the farm where she and Emma lived alone, that required thought. "Where are you staying?" she asked. "Boarding house on Shake Rag Street for now, Mrs. Patterson's place." That was something at least. Martha Patterson ran a respectable establishment and did not tolerate troublemakers. If she had taken Leonard in, he was probably decent enough. "I cannot afford to pay much," Lydia said honestly. and I would need references or some way to know you are trustworthy. Mrs. Patterson can vouch that I pay my rent on time and do not cause trouble. I have been taking odd jobs around town this past week, helping at the livery stable and such. You can ask about me there if you like. As for pay, I will take whatever you think is fair. I am not looking to get rich, madam, just to keep busy and earn my keep. There was something about his manner that Lydia found reassuring. He did not push or pressure. He stated his case simply and then waited, patient as stone. He had not commented on her appearance or the fact that she was alone. He had not offered any of the usual platitudes about women needing protection. He had simply asked about work, as he might have asked any farmer or rancher, man or woman. "All right," she decided. "I will ask about you in town. If what you say checks out, you can start Monday. I need help getting equipment ready for spring and repairing the henhouse. 3 days a week to start, we will see how it goes from there." Leonard nodded once. "That is fair. Thank you, madam. Lydia Davenport," she told him. "Mrs. Davenport." He touched his hat again and turned his horse, riding back down the lane without another word. Emma appeared in the barn doorway. "Who was that man, Mama?" "Someone looking for work. Maybe." Lydia watched him disappear around the bend. "We will see." She went into town the next day, ostensibly to buy flour and sugar, but really to ask around about Leonard Drake. Martha Patterson confirmed that he was a quiet tenant who caused no problems and had paid 2 weeks in advance. The man who ran the livery stable said Leonard knew his way around horses and had done good work. No one had anything bad to say about him, though no one knew much either. He kept to himself, spoke when spoken to, did not drink to excess or gamble or start fights. He seemed, by all accounts, exactly what he claimed to be, a drifter looking for honest work. Monday morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. Lydia was surprised when Leonard arrived exactly at sunrise, riding up on his horse with his breath steaming in the frozen air. She showed him around the farm, pointing out what needed doing. He listened carefully, asked a few practical questions, and got to work without fuss. She left him to it and went about her own tasks, though she found herself checking on him more often than strictly necessary. By midday she could see he knew what he was doing. His movements were efficient and practiced, his repairs solid and well made. When she brought him coffee and bread at noon, he accepted with quiet thanks. They sat on the barn steps in a patch of pale sunlight, not talking much. Lydia found the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Leonard did not seem to feel the need to fill every moment with chatter, something she appreciated after dealing with so many suitors who talked constantly, mostly about themselves. "You have a good place here," Leonard said eventually, looking out over the snow-covered fields. "It is enough for us, my daughter and me." "Mrs. Patterson mentioned your husband passed. I am sorry." "Thank you. It has been a few years now." Lydia wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "What made you leave Texas?" Leonard was quiet for a long moment and she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Too many memories. Sometimes a man needs a fresh start." She understood that. She did not press for details. They finished their coffee in companionable silence, and then Leonard went back to work. Over the next few weeks, Leonard became a regular presence at the farm. He came 3 days a week as agreed, arriving at sunrise and working until late afternoon. He was skilled and reliable, tackling whatever task Lydia set for him with quiet competence. He fixed the henhouse, repaired the plow, replaced broken boards in the barn, and did 100 other small jobs that had been accumulating. Emma grew used to seeing him around and would sometimes follow him, chattering about her doll or her schoolwork. Leonard listened to her patiently, occasionally asking questions but mostly just letting her talk. February arrived with more snow and bitter winds that howled around the farmhouse at night. Lydia worried about the livestock and spent long hours making sure they had sufficient food and water and shelter. Leonard helped without being asked, arriving even on days when he was not scheduled if the weather was particularly bad. He never complained about the cold or the work, just kept his head down and did what needed doing. It was during one of these storm visits that Emma asked him directly, "Why do you not try to marry my mama?" Lydia, who was feeding the chickens, froze. Leonard paused in shoveling snow from the barn door. Emma stood between them, her face curious and open. "Emma," Lydia said sharply, "that is not an appropriate question." "But all the other men want to marry you," Emma said, confused. "Mr. Drake is nice and he does not smell like onions. Why does he not ask?" Leonard leaned on his shovel, his expression unreadable. "Your mama does not want to get married," he said simply. "So I would not ask." "How do you know?" Emma persisted. "Because I listen." He went back to shoveling. Emma looked at her mother, then at Leonard, then shrugged and went back inside. Lydia stood in the cold barnyard holding the bucket of chicken feed, unsure what to say. Leonard worked steadily, not looking at her. Finally, she said, "I apologize for her. She is young and does not understand." "Nothing to apologize for. Children ask honest questions." He paused and straightened, meeting her eyes for the first time in the conversation. "For what it is worth, madam, I think you are doing just fine on your own. You do not need rescuing or looking after. You need a hand sometimes with the heavy work, same as any farmer, but that is different from needing a husband." Something in Lydia's chest, some tension she had not even known she was carrying, loosened. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you might think." Leonard nodded once and returned to his work. Lydia went back to the chickens, but her mind was elsewhere. All the men who had come courting had treated her independence as a temporary condition, something to be remedied through marriage. They had seen a problem to be solved, a woman alone who needed to be returned to her proper place in the natural order. Leonard was the first man who seemed to understand that she had chosen this life deliberately, that her solitude was not loneliness but freedom. March brought the first hints of spring, warm winds and melting snow that turned the roads to mud. Lydia began planning the spring planting, deciding what crops to put in which fields, ordering seeds from the merchant in town. Leonard helped her prepare the fields, plowing the heavy wet earth behind the draft horses. It was hard work, and Lydia often worked alongside him, both of them mud-spattered and exhausted by day's end. They fell into an easy rhythm, anticipating each other's needs and movements without much need for talk. Lydia would start a task and Leonard would simply appear to help lift the heavy part or hold things steady while she worked. She found herself looking forward to the days he came, not just for the help but for his company. He was restful to be around, his presence steady and undemanding. He never asked personal questions or pushed for more than she was willing to give. He was just there, reliable as sunrise. It was during these weeks that Lydia began to notice small things about him. The way he was gentle with the animals, speaking softly to the horses and scratching the cows between their horns. The way he smiled when Emma told him silly jokes, a small crooked smile that transformed his serious face. The way he looked at the land in the evening light, something almost wistful in his expression. She found herself curious about his past, about what had happened in Texas that made him leave, about who he had been before he arrived in Mineral Point. One evening in early April, after a long day of planting, Leonard lingered after work instead of riding back to town immediately. He stood by the fence looking out over the newly planted fields, and Lydia found herself walking over to join him. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma was inside starting supper, her childish voice singing some song she had learned at school. "It is a good piece of land," Leonard said quietly. "Your husband chose well." "We chose it together," Lydia said. "We both worked to buy it, both worked to build what is here. It was ours, not just his. I am sorry. I did not mean to suggest otherwise. I know. Most people do not think of it that way is all. They assume William made all the decisions and I just followed along, but it was not like that. We were partners." She looked out over the fields, remembering. I miss that, the partnership, the way we would talk through problems together, figure things out as a team. Leonard was quiet, and when she glanced at him, she saw something sad in his eyes. "I understand that," he said. "Having someone who is your match, who walks alongside you instead of in front or behind, that is rare. You had that in Texas." "I thought I did." He was silent for a long moment. "Her name was Sarah. We were planning to marry. Then she got sick, fever, same as your husband. She died within a week. That was 2 years ago. I could not stay there after seeing all the places we had been together, remembering, so I left." "I am sorry," Lydia said softly. "That is a hard grief to carry." "It is, but time helps, working helps, moving helps." He looked at her, his dark eyes direct. "You understand, I think, how it changes you." "Yes. I am not the same person I was before William died. I did not know I could be this person, this woman who runs a farm alone and does not need anyone's permission to live her life as she chooses. I loved being William's wife, but I also love being just myself. Does that make sense?" "It does. I loved the man I was with Sarah, but I also had to figure out who I was without her, had to learn to be whole on my own." He pushed away from the fence. "Thank you for telling me about your husband. About your partnership. It helps to know someone else understands. Thank you for sharing about Sarah, and for not treating me like I need fixing." That small, crooked smile appeared. "You are not broken, madam. Why would you need fixing?" After he left, Lydia stood in the gathering darkness, feeling something shift inside her. She had shared more with Leonard in that one conversation than she had with anyone since William died. It had felt natural, easy, like talking to an old friend. She realized she trusted him, this quiet drifter who had appeared in her life only a few months ago. Trusted him in a way she had not trusted any of the local men who came courting with their assumptions and expectations. April brought warmer weather and busier days. The crops began to sprout, tender green shoots pushing up through the dark earth. Lydia expanded Leonard's hours to 4 days a week, and he accepted without comment. Emma finished her school year with good marks, and Lydia felt proud watching her daughter read aloud from her primer, stumbling over the harder words but persisting. William would have been proud too, she thought, and the pang of loss was gentler now, more bittersweet than sharp. The Suitors had mostly given up by this point. Word had gotten around town that the widow Davenport was not interested in remarrying, and most of the men had moved on to other prospects or given up entirely. There was still gossip, of course. Some folks thought Lydia was proud and stubborn. Others whispered that it was unnatural for a woman to prefer being alone. A few suggested she must be carrying on with someone in secret, though they could never agree on who the mysterious lover might be. Lydia ignored it all. She had learned not to care too much what others thought. She attended church on Sundays with Emma, held her head high, and went about her business. Most people were kind enough, whatever they might say behind her back. The ones who truly mattered, her few close friends and the widows who understood, they supported her choices. It was Mrs. Patterson who first suggested to Lydia that perhaps Leonard Drake was more than just a hired hand. They were at the general store, both picking up supplies, when Martha pulled Lydia aside. "That young man who works for you," she said, her voice low. "Leonard. He is a good one." "Yes, he does excellent work," Lydia agreed, examining a bolt of cloth. "I mean as a person. He is steady and honest, respectful. And the way he talks about your farm, about the work you have built there, he admires it, admires you." Lydia looked up sharply. "He has not said anything inappropriate." "No, no, nothing like that. I just mean, well, you could do worse than a man like that, and it is clear he cares, even if he is too much of a gentleman to say so." "Martha, I am not looking for a husband." "I know, dear. Everyone knows. I am just saying, if you were, or if you ever change your mind, that one would not try to change you. He seems to like you just as you are." She patted Lydia's arm. "Just think about it." Lydia did think about it, more than she wanted to admit. She found herself watching Leonard when he worked, noticing things she had not let herself notice before. The strength in his arms as he lifted heavy beams. The patience in his voice when Emma peppered him with questions. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching, something warm and careful in his expression. Did he care for her? Beyond the professional relationship of employer and worker, and more troubling, did she care for him? She was still thinking about it a week later when disaster struck. One of the cows, the better milker of the two, managed to break through a weak spot in the fence and got into the vegetable garden just as things were really starting to grow. By the time Lydia discovered the problem, the cow had trampled and eaten a good portion of the carefully tended plants. Lydia stood looking at the destruction and felt like crying. She needed that food for winter. The money from selling the excess was important to their survival. This one stupid accident could set them back significantly. Leonard arrived to find her sitting on the ground amid the ruined plants, her face in her hands. Emma was at school, so Lydia had let herself give in to despair for just a moment. She heard Leonard's boots approaching and tried to pull herself together, but he had already seen. "What happened?" His voice was sharp with concern. "The cow broke through. Look at it. Weeks of work just destroyed." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. Leonard surveyed the damage, his face grim. Then he crouched beside her. "It is bad," he agreed. "But not impossible. We can replant some things. It is early enough in the season. And I know a few wild patches where things grow that you can harvest for winter stores. Greens and herbs and such. We will figure it out. I cannot afford more seeds. Then we will be creative, Lydia." It was the first time he had used her given name, and it caught her attention. "Look at me." She raised her head. His dark eyes were serious but kind. "You have been through worse than this and survived. Your husband dying, raising your daughter alone, running this farm by yourself. You are strong enough to handle one setback, and you are not alone. I will help you fix this. You work for me. This is not your problem. Maybe I am tired of it just being work." He said it quietly, almost carefully. "Maybe I would like to help because I care, not because you pay me." Lydia stared at him. Her heart was suddenly beating too fast. "Leonard, I am not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I just want you to know you do not have to carry everything by yourself. If you want help, real help, the kind that comes from someone who cares about you and Emma in this place, I am offering. No expectations, no demands, just company if you would like it." It was so different from every other offer she had received. He was not asking to marry her or take over her farm or even court her properly. He was just asking if she would like company, if she would like a friend, a partner, someone to walk alongside her. The simplicity of it, the honesty, broke something open inside her chest. "Yes," she whispered. "I would like that." His smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "All right then." They worked together to clean up the garden and replant what they could. Leonard was true to his word, taking her to places in the nearby woods where wild herbs and vegetables grew. He showed her which mushrooms were safe to eat and which to avoid, where to find wild onions and watercress. He helped her repair and reinforce the fence so the cow could not break through again. But more than the practical help, He offered something else: steady presence and genuine care. Emma noticed the change immediately. "Mama, are you and Mr. Drake going to get married?" she asked one evening as they prepared for bed. "I do not know," Lydia admitted. It was the most honest answer she could give. "We are friends. He helps us not because he has to, but because he wants to." "I like him," Emma said simply. "He is nice to you, he is nice to me. Papa would like him too, I think." Lydia pulled her daughter close. "I think you are right. Papa would want us to be happy, would not he?" "Yes, and he would want us to have help when we need it." He was not too proud to ask for help. Out of the mouths of babes, Lydia thought. William had never been too proud to admit when he needed assistance, had never seen asking for help as weakness. Why should she? And Leonard was not offering to take over or take away her independence. He was offering to share the load, to be a partner. That was different. The spring turned into summer, and the rhythm of farm life continued. Crops grew. Emma ran barefoot through the fields, and Leonard was there more often than not. He started staying for supper sometimes, and those evenings were some of the happiest Lydia had known since William's death. They would sit around the table, the three of them, talking about the day and making plans for tomorrow. Leonard taught Emma to whittle, and she made crude wooden animals with fierce concentration. Lydia found herself laughing more, the tight knot of grief and responsibility that had lived in her chest for 3 years gradually loosening. One evening in late June, after Emma had gone to bed, Lydia and Leonard sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the darkness. The air was soft and warm, heavy with the scent of growing things. Neither of them spoke for a long time, just sitting in the peaceful silence. Finally, Lydia said, "I need to tell you something. All right. When you first came here, I was not looking for anything except help with the farm. I had refused every man who tried to court me because I did not want to give up my independence. I had worked too hard to build this life on my own to hand it over to someone else. I know. But you never asked for that. You never tried to take over or tell me what to do. You just offered to walk alongside me. And somewhere in these past months, I have come to care for you. More than just as a worker or even as a friend." She took a breath. "I think I might be falling in love with you, and that terrifies me." Leonard was quiet for a moment, and Lydia's heart hammered. Then he reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle. "I have been in love with you since about March," he said. "Maybe earlier. I did not say anything because I did not want to be like all those other men, pushing for something you did not want to give. But Lydia, I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you are with Emma. I love that you know your own mind and do not apologize for it. And I promise you, if you give me a chance, I will never try to take your independence from you. I would not want you any other way." Lydia felt tears on her cheeks, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I am still afraid," she admitted. "That is all right. We can go as slow as you need. I am not going anywhere." She leaned her head on his shoulder and he put his arm around her. They sat like that for a long time, watching the night deepen around them, and Lydia felt something she had not expected to feel again: hope. July brought hot days and sudden thunderstorms that rolled across the hills with spectacular displays of lightning. The crops grew tall and green, promising a good harvest. Emma turned 8, and they celebrated with a cake Lydia baked and small gifts. Leonard gave Emma a wooden horse he had carved himself, detailed and beautiful, and the girl hugged him fiercely in thanks. Watching them together, Lydia felt her last reservations melting away. Emma needed a father, and Leonard would be a good one. She could see that clearly now. But more than that, Lydia herself wanted this, wanted Leonard. Not because she needed rescuing or could not manage alone, but because life was richer with him in it. because partnership did not have to mean surrendering herself, and love did not have to mean losing her hard-won independence. With Leonard, she could be both, her own person and part of something larger. One Sunday after church, Lydia stood talking with a group of women when Mrs. Garrett, Thomas Garrett's mother, approached. The older woman had never forgiven Lydia for refusing her son. "I see you have been stepping out with that drifter," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I suppose when you could not get a respectable local man, you had to settle for a stranger." Lydia felt Leonard stiffen beside her, but before either of them could respond, Martha Patterson spoke up. "Leonard Drake is twice the man your Thomas will ever be, Agnes, and everyone knows it." Lydia did not settle. She waited for someone worthy of her, and she found him. Several other women murmured agreement. Agnes Garrett's face turned red and she stalked off. Lydia squeezed Martha's hand in thanks, and the older woman winked. As they walked back to the farm, Emma skipping ahead, Leonard said, "Does it bother you, what people say?" "Not as much as it used to. I have learned to care more about what is true than what people think." She looked at him. "And the truth is I love you. That is all that matters." He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "Lydia Davenport, will you marry me?" "Not because you need to, not because society says you should, but because you want to. Because you love me and I love you and we are better together than apart." "Yes," she said, and kissed him right there in the road with Emma cheering behind them. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed in August of 1879, a simple ceremony in the same Methodist church where Lydia had married William 7 years earlier. Emma stood up with them, glowing with happiness. Martha Patterson and a handful of other friends attended, along with a few curious townspeople who wanted to see if the widow would really go through with it. Lydia wore a simple blue dress, not mourning black but not bridal white either, something in between that felt right for a second marriage. Leonard wore his best clothes, which were not fancy but were clean and pressed, and when he looked at her his eyes said everything she needed to know. The pastor asked if Lydia took Leonard to be her husband, and she said, "I do," and meant it with her whole heart. She was not giving up anything. She was gaining a partner, a love, a man who saw her as she truly was and loved her for it. When they kissed to seal the marriage, Emma threw wildflowers she had picked that morning, and everyone laughed. The celebration afterward was small but joyful. They held it at the farm, with food laid out on the porch and music from a fiddler who lived up the road. Emma danced with anyone who would dance with her, her face bright with uncomplicated joy. Lydia danced with Leonard, his arms strong around her, and thought about how different this was from her first wedding. Then she had been young and uncertain, full of dreams but unsure how to achieve them. Now she was older, scarred by loss, but also stronger and more certain of herself. This love was different too, deeper somehow, built on clear eyes and honest understanding rather than youthful passion. Both were real. Both mattered. She was grateful to have known both kinds of love in her life. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Leonard pulled Lydia aside. "I know you loved your husband," he said quietly. "I do not expect to replace him or make you forget him, but I promise to honor what you built together and help you build something new. Our marriage will be what we make it, a partnership like you had before." "I know," Lydia said. "That is why I said yes. You understand that I am not looking for someone to take care of me. I am looking for someone to share my life with. There is a difference. A big difference." He smiled. "I am glad we found each other, Lydia Drake." She smiled at the new name, Lydia Drake. It felt right, felt like the beginning of something good. "So am I." Leonard moved into the farmhouse that night, and it was strange at first having another adult in the space that had been just hers and Emma's for so long. But Leonard was sensitive to the adjustment, giving them space when they needed it, helping where he could without taking over. He asked before rearranging anything, deferred to Lydia's opinions on farm matters, made sure Emma still got special time with just her mother. He fit himself into their lives carefully, like a piece of wood shaped to fill a specific gap. The harvest that year was abundant, better than Lydia had managed alone. With Leonard's help, they brought in the corn and hay, sold what they did not need, and stored the rest. The money was enough to cover expenses and even have a little left over for extras. Lydia bought Emma new shoes and a coat for winter. Leonard repaired the roof on the house and added a small addition for a proper bedroom, giving Emma her own space. As autumn painted the hills in gold and red, Lydia reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. Leonard had arrived in January, a stranger looking for work. Now it was October, and he was her husband, sleeping beside her each night and working beside her each day. Emma called him Papa Leonard and seemed genuinely happy. The farm was thriving, and Lydia herself felt more content than she had in years, maybe ever. She had not lost her independence by marrying Leonard. If anything, having a true partner made her stronger, because she could tackle bigger challenges knowing someone had her back. Winter came again, and this time the cold and work were shared. Leonard chopped wood while Lydia cooked. They took turns feeding the animals, going out into the frigid mornings together when the work was heavy. In the evenings they sat by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes in comfortable silence, while Emma read her books or played with her toys. It was domestic and ordinary and absolutely precious. One night in December, as they lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, Leonard said, "Are you happy?" "Yes," Lydia said without hesitation. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought I would be again. After Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over, that I had used up my chance at love and happiness. But then I found you, and you gave me a second chance. I will never take that for granted." Lydia curled closer to him. "I felt the same way after William died, like that chapter was closed and all I could do was survive what came next. But this is not just surviving. This is living fully again." "Together," Leonard said. "Together," she agreed. Spring of 1880 brought new beginnings. Lydia discovered she was pregnant in March, and the news filled the household with excitement. Emma was thrilled at the prospect of a baby brother or sister. Leonard was nervous but happy, fussing over Lydia until she laughingly told him to stop treating her like she was made of glass. "Women have babies all the time," she reminded him. "I did it before and survived just fine." "I know. I just want to take care of you." "You do. Every day. Now stop worrying and help me plant the garden." The pregnancy progressed normally, and Lydia continued her work on the farm as long as she was able. Leonard gradually took over the heavier tasks, but he consulted with her on every decision, making sure she remained the final authority on how the farm was run. It was exactly the kind of partnership she had wanted, and it worked because they both committed to making it work. In late September, Lydia went into labor. Emma stayed with Martha Patterson in town while Leonard fetched the midwife and then stayed by Lydia's side through the long hours. It was harder than she remembered from Emma's birth, or perhaps she had just forgotten how difficult it was. But Leonard held her hand and encouraged her, and finally, as the sun rose on a clear autumn morning, their son was born. They named him William Leonard Drake, honoring both the past and the present. He was a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs and dark hair like his father. Emma was enchanted with her baby brother and wanted to help with everything. Lydia watched her daughter carefully hold the baby, watched Leonard rock his son with tender attention, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had been given a second chance at love, at family, at happiness, and she had been brave enough to take it. The years that followed were good ones. Young William grew strong and healthy, learning to walk and talk and eventually help with small chores around the farm. Emma grew into a thoughtful young woman, attending school and helping care for her brother. The farm continued to prosper under Leonard and Lydia's joint management. They made decisions together, divided labor according to ability and preference rather than strict gender roles, and built something solid. In 1882, Lydia gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, after Leonard's first love. It was Lydia's idea, and Leonard had cried when she suggested it. "You do not have to forget her to love me," Lydia had told him. "She was part of making you who you are. We can honor that." Baby Sarah had her mother's light brown hair and her father's serious eyes. She was a quiet baby, content to watch the world around her with thoughtful attention. Emma, now 11, was an excellent helper with the two little ones. Leonard expanded the house again, adding more rooms so everyone had adequate space. The farm continued to grow as well. Leonard bought adjoining property when it became available, increasing their acreage. They added more cows and pigs, expanded the chicken coop, and planted an orchard. It was hard work, but rewarding. They hired help during busy seasons, usually young men from town who needed work, and Leonard treated them fairly, remembering his own days as an itinerant laborer. The town's opinion of Lydia had shifted over the years. Where once she had been the stubborn widow who refused good offers, she was now seen as the sharp businesswoman who had waited for the right partner and built a successful farm. Some folks still grumbled that it was not proper for a woman to have such a head for business, but most respected what she and Leonard had achieved. And as their children grew and thrived, even the critics had to admit the marriage was a good one. Emma turned 16 in 1886, a young woman now with her mother's strength and her father's kind heart. She had been only 7 when William died, 14 when Lydia married Leonard. She had no memory of her life without Leonard being part of it, and she loved him as truly as any daughter loved a father. When people asked about her family, she always said she had 2 fathers, one in heaven and one at home, and both had shaped who she was. It was Emma who first noticed that her mother had begun teaching some of the farm wives about managing accounts and making business decisions. Lydia had started small, helping a neighbor figure out how to get a better price for her eggs, but word had spread. Soon women from surrounding farms were coming to ask Lydia's advice about everything from negotiations with buyers to managing household finances. Lydia discovered she had a gift for teaching and a passion for helping other women find their own strength and capabilities. Leonard encouraged this wholeheartedly. "You have wisdom worth sharing," he told her. "Why keep it to yourself?" So Lydia began holding informal gatherings at the farm, teaching women about farm management and business practices. Some husbands objected, but many saw the value in having partners who understood the financial side of farming. The women who attended were hungry for knowledge, asking questions and sharing their own experiences. Lydia found it deeply satisfying, this opportunity to help other women discover what she had learned, that they were capable of far more than society told them. By 1888, the Drake farm was one of the most successful in the region. They had weathered bad seasons and good, always working together to solve problems and capitalize on opportunities. William was now 7, a sturdy boy who loved working with the animals. Sarah was 6, quieter but equally capable, with a special talent for growing things. Emma was 18 and being courted by a young farmer from the next town over, a decent man who seemed to genuinely respect her intelligence and opinions. Lydia approved, and Leonard had given his blessing, but they all knew Emma would make her own choice in the end. One evening in late summer, Lydia and Leonard sat on the porch watching the sun set over their land. The children were inside. Emma reading to her younger siblings. From the house came the sound of laughter and young William's protesting voice as Sarah corrected his reading. "You ever regret it?" Leonard asked suddenly. "Marrying me, I mean, giving up your independence." Lydia looked at him in surprise. "I did not give up my independence, I shared my life. Those are different things. And no, I have never regretted it, not once, have you?" "Never. I just know how important it was to you, being on your own, proving you could do it. I hope I have never made you feel like you lost that." "Leonard, look at me." She waited until he met her eyes. "You made it possible for me to be more than I was, not less. Together we have built something bigger than either of us could have built alone. That is not loss. That is growth. And our partnership has shown Emma and the other children that marriage can be about mutual respect and shared goals. That is a gift. I love you," he said simply. "I love you too. Now stop being maudlin and help me shell these peas." He laughed and took the bowl she handed him, and they worked together in the fading light, comfortable and content. Emma married in the spring of 1889, a beautiful wedding held at the farm with half the county in attendance. Her young man, James, seemed genuinely devoted to her, and Lydia had high hopes for their happiness. Watching her daughter speak her vows, Lydia thought about her own 2 marriages, how different they had been yet how both had been built on love. She caught Leonard's eye across the crowd and smiled. He smiled back, and in that moment she felt the completeness of her life, the way all the broken pieces had come together into something whole and beautiful. After Emma moved to her own farm with James, the house felt emptier but not unhappily so. William and Sarah still filled it with noise and activity. Leonard and Lydia settled into a new rhythm, still working hard but also taking time to enjoy what they had built. On Sundays after church, they would walk the property line, looking at everything they had accomplished, planning future improvements. They were partners in every sense, and the love between them had only deepened with time. In 1891, Lydia discovered she was pregnant again. She was 36 now, and this pregnancy was harder than the previous ones. She tired easily and had to let Leonard take over more of the farm work than she liked. But he handled it without complaint, and William, now 10, stepped up to help more as well. Even 8-year-old Sarah did her part, taking over the chickens entirely and managing them with quiet competence. The baby, another boy they named Peter, was born in early 1892. He was small but healthy, and Lydia recovered well from the birth. With 3 younger children in the house, life was busy and chaotic, but it was a happy chaos. Emma visited often, bringing news of her own farm, and in late 1892, announcing that she was expecting her first child. The cycle continued, Lydia thought. Life moving forward, new generations growing. The farm continued to prosper through the 1890s. Leonard proved to have excellent business sense, and together, he and Lydia made the Drake farm a model of successful small farming. They adopted progressive techniques, rotated crops properly, invested in good equipment. Other farmers came to ask their advice, and Leonard was always generous with his knowledge, remembering what it had been like to be struggling and alone. Lydia's informal teaching of farm wives had grown into something more organized. She now held regular meetings, teaching not just business skills but also basic literacy to those who needed it. Leonard supported this fully, sometimes watching the children so Lydia could focus on her teaching. He never saw her work as less important than his own, and she loved him for that understanding. Emma had her baby, a girl named Lydia after her grandmother, in 1893. Lydia held her granddaughter and felt the strange passage of time, how she was now the elder generation, the grandmother. It felt both impossibly strange and perfectly natural. She had lived long enough to see her daughter grown and starting her own family. That was a blessing not everyone received. As the century drew toward its close, the Drake farm stood as a testament to what was possible when two people worked together in genuine partnership. Leonard and Lydia had built not just a successful business but a family, a home, a life rich with love and purpose. Their children grew strong and capable, learning from their parents' example that marriage should be about mutual respect and shared responsibility. William turned 18 in 1901 and announced his intention to go to agricultural college. Lydia and Leonard were proud and made arrangements to support his education. Sarah, at 16, was showing real talent for plant breeding and wanted to focus on developing better crop varieties. Peter, now 9, was still figuring out his interests, but showed promise in everything he tried. Each child was encouraged to pursue their own path, with their parents' full support. On a warm evening in the summer of 1902, Leonard and Lydia celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children arranged a party, inviting friends and neighbors to the farm. Emma came with her husband and 3 children now. Former students of Lydia's teaching sessions attended, many of them now running successful farms of their own or businesses in town. It was a testament to the impact two people could have when they lived their values and helped others. As the party wound down and the guests departed, Leonard and Lydia found themselves alone on the porch again, just as they had been so many times over the years. The farm spread out before them in the gathering dusk, fields and buildings they had built together through hard work and partnership. 20 years, Lydia said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like you arrived yesterday, and sometimes it feels like you have always been here. I feel the same. I cannot really remember my life before this place. I mean, I remember the facts of it, but it feels like someone else's life. My real life started when I rode up that lane looking for work and found so much more. I was so determined to never marry again, Lydia said, so sure that independence meant being alone. I am grateful you showed me I was wrong, that I could have both partnership and autonomy, love and freedom. You taught me that too. I thought after Sarah died that I was done with love, that I should just keep moving and never let anyone close again. But you showed me that love does not have to hurt, that it can heal and strengthen rather than destroy. You saved me, Lydia. We saved each other, she corrected. That is what real partnership is, not one person rescuing the other, but both of them making each other stronger. Leonard pulled her close, and they sat together watching the stars come out. Inside the house, their children moved about, preparing for bed, living their lives in the space their parents had created. From the barn came the soft sounds of horses settling for the night. The land spread around them, fertile and productive, waiting for tomorrow's work. Tell me something, Leonard said. If you could go back and talk to that woman who stood in the barnyard covered in muck, suspicious of the stranger asking for work, what would you say to her? Lydia thought about it. I would tell her that saying yes to you was not saying no to herself, that she could let someone in and still remain whole, that the best things in life often come from taking risks on people who see us as we truly are. She smiled. What would you tell the man who rode up that day? I would tell him he was about to find home, that the quiet widow with dirt under her fingernails and steel in her spine was going to change his life. That asking if she wanted company instead of offering to rescue her would make all the difference. He kissed the top of her head. I would tell him to be patient, to let her come to trust him, because she was worth waiting for. They stayed outside long after the children had gone to bed, talking about the past and planning the future. William would go off to college in the fall. Sarah wanted to start a greenhouse next spring. Peter needed new boots. Emma's youngest was learning to walk. The farm needed a new plow. The roof on the barn should be checked before winter. Ordinary concerns, the daily fabric of a life built together. As they finally went inside, Lydia paused at the door and looked back one more time at the land they had cultivated, the buildings they had raised, the life they had made. She thought about the woman she had been, the widow who had refused every suitor because she would not settle for anything less than true partnership. She had been right to wait, right to insist on her own terms. And Leonard had been right to approach her differently, to ask what she wanted rather than assuming he knew best. The next years brought changes, as years always do. William excelled at college and came home with new farming techniques and ideas. Sarah's experiments with crop breeding began to show real promise. Peter decided he wanted to be a veterinarian and began apprenticing with the local animal doctor. Emma's family grew, and the grandchildren visited often, filling the farmhouse with noise and joy. Leonard's hair turned gray, and Lydia found her own streaked with white. They moved a bit slower, tired a bit more easily, but they were still partners, still working side by side. In 1905, they finally hired a full-time manager to handle much of the day-to-day farm operations. It was time, they agreed. They had worked hard for nearly 30 years, building something substantial. Now they could afford to step back a little, to enjoy the fruits of their labor. William returned from college to take over much of the management, bringing his new knowledge to improve operations even further. Sarah turned her greenhouse into a small business, selling seedlings and bred varieties to other farmers. The Drake farm expanded its operations and reputation. Lydia, now 50 and feeling it in her joints on cold mornings, focused more on her teaching and less on physical farm labor. She had become something of a local celebrity, the woman who proved that females could be successful in business if given the chance and proper education. Young women came from across the region to attend her sessions, and several had gone on to start their own businesses or take over family farms. Lydia found deep satisfaction in this legacy of empowerment. Leonard, at 53, still worked hard but had learned to delegate. He spent more time with his grandchildren, teaching them about animals and crops and the value of honest work. He had become a respected elder in the community, someone people came to for advice on farming and business and life in general. He never forgot where he had started, though, the drifting cowboy with a broken heart looking for something to hold on to. That memory kept him humble and generous. One afternoon in the spring of 1907, Lydia and Leonard sat in the garden Sarah had designed, surrounded by carefully arranged flowers and ornamental plants. They were watching young Peter, now 15, work with a sick calf, his touch gentle and his focus intense. Emma's oldest child, Lydia's namesake, now 14 herself, was helping him, holding the calf steady while Peter examined it. "We did well," Leonard said quietly. "Look at them. Strong, capable, kind, that is our legacy." "We did," Lydia agreed. All of them know they can choose their own paths, that they are not limited by what society says they should be. Emma runs her farm as an equal partner with James. Sarah is a successful businesswoman. William is bringing modern techniques to farming, and Peter will heal animals. We gave them that freedom to be whoever they want to be. You gave them that. You showed them what it looked like to stand firm in who you are. No, we gave them that. Together. I could not have done any of this without you, Leonard. You made it possible for me to be both independent and partnered, both strong and loved. That is what our children saw, and that is what they learned." He took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that had begun to trouble his fingers. "I love you, Lydia Drake. I have loved you for 28 years, and I will love you until my last breath. And I love you. Thank you for asking if I wanted company instead of assuming you knew what I needed. That one question changed everything. They sat in the garden until the sun began to set, watching their grandson tend the calf with patient skill, watching their granddaughter assist with quiet competence. Inside the farmhouse, Sarah was preparing dinner, humming to herself as she worked. From the barn came the sound of William's voice calling to the workers. The farm hummed with life and activity, a machine built by love and maintained by partnership. As evening fell and they went inside to join their family for dinner, Lydia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had been a young bride, a grieving widow, a determined, independent woman, and now a wife and mother and grandmother again. Each phase had taught her something, shaped her, made her who she was. The grief of losing William had been real and deep, but it had also revealed her own strength. The years alone had proven she could survive on her own, that she did not need a man to be complete. And Leonard had shown her that choosing partnership was not the same as surrendering independence, that love could enhance rather than diminish who she was. The table was crowded that night, filled with family and talk and laughter. Emma and James had come over with their children. William's young wife, recently married, sat beside him looking slightly overwhelmed by the chaos but smiling. Sarah told stories about a customer at her greenhouse who wanted to grow tropical plants in Wisconsin. Peter described the calf's condition and his treatment plan. The grandchildren interrupted constantly, demanding attention and food and answers to endless questions. Leonard caught Lydia's eye across the table and smiled, and she smiled back. This was what they had built, not just a successful farm but a family bound by love and respect. They had shown their children and grandchildren that marriage could be about partnership, that women could be strong and independent while also being wives and mothers, that men could be gentle and supportive while also being respected leaders. They had changed not just their own lives but the lives of everyone around them. After dinner, when the others had left or gone to bed, Lydia and Leonard took their customary walk around the property. The moon was bright, silvering the fields and buildings. They walked slowly, hand in hand, stopping occasionally to look at something or just to stand together in the quiet night. "You remember the day the cow broke through the fence?" Leonard asked. "When you were sitting in the ruined garden and I said you were not alone." "I remember." That was when things changed, when we stopped being just employer and worker and became something more. That was the day I knew I loved you, seeing you there, so strong and yet vulnerable, needing help but afraid to accept it. I wanted to be the person you could trust with that vulnerability. "You were. You are." Lydia leaned against him. "You have never used my trust against me, never tried to turn partnership into domination. That is a rare gift, Leonard." They completed their circuit and returned to the house. The downstairs was dark and quiet now, everyone asleep. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom, moving with the ease of long familiarity. As they prepared for bed, Lydia watched Leonard in the lamplight and thought about how lucky she had been. Twice in her life she had found true love, true partnership. Many people never found it once. She had been blessed beyond measure. The years continued their steady march. The children all established themselves in their chosen paths. Emma and James's farm prospered, and they raised 5 children to adulthood. William transformed the Drake farm into one of the most progressive agricultural operations in Wisconsin, implementing techniques learned at college and constantly innovating. Sarah's greenhouse business expanded to include a mail order catalog, shipping seeds and plants across the Midwest. Peter became a respected veterinarian, caring for animals throughout the region. Lydia's teaching program evolved into a formal school, meeting weekly in a building in town that she and Leonard funded. Women came from miles around to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and business skills. Many went on to start their own businesses or take active roles in family farms. The school was controversial, some men still objecting to educating women beyond basic domesticity, but it was also undeniably successful. The women who attended became more effective partners in their families' businesses, and the families prospered as a result. Leonard, now in his 60s, finally retired from active farm work, though he still consulted with William on major decisions. He spent his time working with young farmers, teaching them what he had learned over decades of experience. He was a patient teacher, remembering his own days as a struggling worker, and many credited him with helping them establish successful operations. He never charged for his advice, considering it his responsibility to pass on what he had learned. In the spring of 1915, Lydia and Leonard celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary. The celebration was quieter than the 20th had been, just family gathering for Sunday dinner. But it was no less meaningful. They had built something lasting, something that would continue after they were gone. Their children were established and happy. Their grandchildren were growing strong and capable. The farm was prosperous. The teaching school was thriving. They had made a real difference in their corner of the world. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over land they knew as intimately as their own bodies, Leonard said, "I have no regrets. Whatever happens from here, I want you to know that. This life we built together, it is more than I ever dreamed possible." "I feel the same," Lydia said. "I thought my life was over when William died. I thought the best I could hope for was survival, but you showed me I was wrong. We built something better than survival. We built joy." "Partners," Leonard said. "Partners," Lydia agreed. "Always." They sat together as the stars came out, comfortable in the silence, secure in their love. Inside the house, Sarah was playing piano, the music drifting out through the open windows. From the barn came the soft sounds of animals settling for the night. The land around them was peaceful and productive, the result of decades of careful stewardship. Everything they had worked for had come to fruition, and it was good. As they finally went inside, Lydia paused at the door and looked back one last time at the farm spread out in the moonlight. She thought about the woman she had been 37 years ago, standing in this same spot, watching Thomas Garrett's wagon disappear down the road. That woman had been so certain she knew what she wanted, so determined to protect her independence at all costs. She had been right to refuse the men who wanted to change her, to own her, to diminish her. But she had also learned that the right person did not threaten her independence, he enhanced it. Leonard had never asked her to be less than she was. He had only asked if she wanted company, and that simple question had opened the door to everything that followed. "Come to bed," Leonard called from inside. Lydia smiled and followed him in, closing the door on the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, but they would face it together, as they had faced everything for 33 years. Partners in work and in love, equals in all the ways that mattered, they had built a life that honored both of them. And that, Lydia thought as she climbed the stairs to their bedroom, was the greatest achievement of all. Not the successful farm or the thriving children or the business or the teaching. Those were all wonderful, but the real triumph was the love they had built, the partnership that respected both of them fully. That was what would endure, passed down through their children and grandchildren, changing the world one family at a time. As she settled into bed beside Leonard, his arm coming around her in the familiar gesture of comfort and companionship, Lydia felt complete peace. She had lived fully and loved deeply, not once but twice. She had been brave enough to refuse what was wrong and patient enough to wait for what was right. She had shown her daughter and countless other women that they did not have to choose between independence and love, that the right partner would honor both. And she had found in Leonard Drake a man who understood that supporting his wife's strength did not diminish his own, that real partnership required two whole people choosing to walk together rather than one swallowing the other. "I love you," she whispered in the darkness. "I love you too," Leonard replied. "Always have, always will." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that whatever time they had left would be spent together, partners until the end and beyond. The farm stood solid around them, their children and grandchildren safe and happy, their legacy assured. The quiet cowboy who had asked if she wanted company had given Lydia Drake the world, and she had given him the same in return. It was, by any measure, a love story for the ages, built not on grand gestures or dramatic passion but on the steady foundation of mutual respect, genuine partnership, and the daily choice to honor and cherish each other. And that, in the end, was what made it last.